Good morning. Today you are going to be doing a study guide over ancient Rome. This will actually cover the entire ancient Rome unit. We've done a few tests actually within this unit, but this is going to be a review of everything. So we have read just yesterday about the Eastern and Western empires, and I want to read a little bit more from the story of the world about the Eastern Empire because we read just a little bit about Justinian, but not much in detail at all. So there is a great story in here about Justinian and his wife Theodora, who's also an important part of the Byzantine Empire. So you do have that study guide to fill out, but this is just an extra little bonus video. If you don't have time for it, today, you could watch it tomorrow as well. But I hope that you enjoyed hearing about Justinian and Theodora in the Byzantine Empire. Now, powerful rulers made Constantinople great. And remember, Constantinople is the capital of the Byzantine Empire, which is the same as the Eastern Empire. One of the most powerful rulers of all Byzantium was Justinian, who was nicknamed the Just Emperor, meaning he was very fair. Now, Justinian's parents were not important people. They were just peasants who lived hundreds of miles away from the great city of Constantinople. They grew crops and tended animals for a living. But Justinian didn't want to be a farmer. He wanted to be a great educated man. He learned how to read, and he spent every spare minute studying law, music, poetry, and religious books. He begged his family to send him to Constantinople so that he could go to school. Finally, Justinian's parents agreed. They packed his clothes and books. His mother cooked him bread and meat to eat on the journey, and Justinian began the long journey to the city of Constantinople. When he arrived in the city, he was overwhelmed. The buildings were the biggest he had ever seen. People swarmed everywhere, and his studies were difficult. He had to memorize 50 lines of Greek poetry every single day. I think that Adventures of Isabel was long. Now, he had to learn also how to make convincing speeches in public. The teachers at the school gave him hours of homework every day in math, music, and astronomy, study of the stars. That's the scientific study of the stars. We were talking about astrology, but that's not scientific. It's just trying to figure out things from the stars. But when he finished school, young Justinian joined the army. He was brave and full of energy, and he spent hours helping the officers keep records, order supplies, and plan their campaigns. Soon, more and more people agreed. Justinian would make a good emperor. When the emperor died, Justinian was named ruler of the Byzantine Empire. When Justinian became emperor in the year 527 AD, so this is more recent somewhat, Byzantium was not very big yet, but Justinian decided to change that. He had read many books about the greatness and glory of the old Roman Empire, and he wanted that empire back. So Justinian recruited more and more men into his army. He set off on campaigns to reconquer the countries that used to belong to Rome, including Italy, North Africa, Spain, and all the countries around the shores of the Mediterranean. He even took Rome away from the barbarians who were living there. So Rome actually was not in the hands of Romans for a little while, so he reclaimed it. But the war to recapture Rome destroyed what was left of the old city. Justinian was left with nothing but ruins. Did Justinian recapture all the land that used to belong to Rome? Remember how big the Roman Empire had been. Here's Europe. Or actually, let me present my screen for just a moment. We'll look up a comparison of the Roman Empire and the Byzantine Empire. That's just the Roman Western versus the Eastern. Okay, this shows the extent of the empire under Justinian, who we're reading about right now. So he got back a lot of land, including parts of Egypt, North Africa, Spain, and France, which we already heard about. But under the rule of Caesar Augustus and Julius Caesar, they had more of Gaul in these areas, further north into Europe. Okay, but let's continue reading. So did he recapture all of the land that used to belong to Rome? Well, no, but he did make the Byzantine Empire bigger than it had ever been before. And now that he ruled all of those different countries, Justinian had a problem, which is what we saw with ancient Rome too. When it got too big, it became harder to manage. Each country had its own laws. Something that was against the law in one country might be perfectly fine in another country. A thief might be put to death in one part of the empire, but only told to pay a fine in another part. It was very confusing to rule an empire full of different laws. So Justinian set out to make one set of laws for everyone in his empire. And remember, he studied law, so this is a good fit for him. Now, it was a huge job. Hundreds of scholars helped him to collect all the laws of the ancient Romans and the Greeks. So he's pulling from inspiration from those Romans and Greeks for the Byzantine Empire, just like us. The American government was pulling inspiration from those great ideas that had already been in existence. So they created a new law. Finally, the new set of laws, the Code of Justinian, was finished. Everyone in the Byzantine Empire was supposed to follow these laws. Here are a few of those laws of Justinian. The sea and the seashore belong to everyone. Every person in my empire is allowed to go to the beach, is paraphrased what Justinian would have said. No one can tell them, I own this part of the beach, get off of it. So the water is basically free game for everybody. Rivers belong to everyone. Well, that was the sea and the seashore. Here's rivers. Rivers belong to everyone. Everyone in my empire can fish in the rivers without being told to stop. It's a good rule. If you find a jewel or other treasure washed up on the seashore, you can keep it for yourself. So that seashore doesn't belong to anybody. So if you find some sort of treasure, then it belongs to you if you found it. You are allowed to own slaves and make them work for you without pay, but you can't beat or mistreat your slaves unless they are disobedient. Sadly, that was true of not just the Byzantine Empire, but lots of parts of the world. That was okay, and it was even part of the law that you could own slaves without actually paying them. Now, a thief who steals something valuable must pay the owner 4 times what the stolen object is worth. Okay? So if you steal something, you have to pay back 4 times the amount. If you're trimming a tree near a road, be sure to call out to anyone coming by, be careful, limbs might fall on you. If you don't call out a warning and a limb falls on a traveler and hurts him, it's your fault. That makes sense. But if you call out a warning and the traveler still walks under that tree anyway, it isn't your fault if a limb falls on him and hurts him. He should have paid attention to your warning. When a bishop, priest, or pastor is praying or preaching, he has to speak loudly enough for everyone to hear. If he doesn't, God will punish him, and so will the emperor. So that was with good motive. They wanted everybody to have a chance to hear, but that's pretty crazy. How could they? It's possible that they couldn't speak loud enough. They didn't have microphones or anything. So they shouldn't be punished for something that they could not do. So do you think some of those are fair? Are there any that you think are unfair? Especially the slavery one, obviously, is very unfair. And I think the last one seems a little bit silly. But a lot of those make a lot of sense. Like a thief paying back 4 times the amount means that not only is that person recovering what they had stolen, but then hopefully that's going to convince the thief not to do it again. Okay, well, and then maybe with the seashore one, you're thinking, well, what if somebody just drops their necklace and then somebody else comes along and finds it? Doesn't mean just finders keepers. Okay, let's continue reading a little about Justinian, specifically his wife, the empress, meaning the wife of the emperor, Theodora. Now, Justinian was a powerful emperor, but he didn't rule the Byzantine Empire all alone. His wife, the Empress Theodora, was a brilliant and energetic woman who helped him make his decisions. Theodora wasn't always an empress. Her parents ran a circus at the Hippodrome, a huge arena in Constantinople. Her father was the circus bear trainer. Little Theodora used to sit in the warm sand of the arena and watch him work with his bears. Sometimes she fed the bears apples and honey to reward them for doing their tricks. When she grew a little older, Theodora got to work as a clown in the circus. So she became an empress later, but started off as a clown. She painted her face white and pretended that she couldn't speak. The audience loved Theodora's act. Soon, Theodora was acting in plays as well and attracting hundreds of fans. They came to see her shows, threw flowers at her, and applauded her performances. Theodora was a success. She got to travel all around the Byzantine Empire, staying in the best inns, eating the best food, and drinking the best wine. But one day, Theodora heard about Christianity and decided to become a Christian. I can't go on being an actress, going to parties every night and doing whatever I please, she thought. I need to have a different kind of life, a quiet and peaceful life. So her faith and her religious beliefs led her to think that way of living before, where I was going out and dancing with people and going to parties every night, that is not what I want for my life. I want a nice, quiet life. So Theodora left her job as an actress, moved to Constantinople, and became a wool spinner. Just like in Princess and the Goblin we heard about, great-great-great-great-grandmother Irene spinning. So she spent her days quietly making wool thread out of sheep's wool and selling it to the merchants of Constantinople. That is a huge sacrifice. She was rich and famous, and she knew that that was not a good life for her. So she decided to give it up and have a simple life where she was just spinning wool. Nice, simple life. But she was happier. Well, we're assuming she was happier because she was choosing that way of life. One day, Theodora was walking to the market with a basket full of yarn when she heard, make way for the soldiers of the royal army." She stepped out of the street and craned her neck to see the soldiers. Justinian hadn't become the emperor yet. He was still just serving in the army. So he was riding with the other soldiers wearing a red cloak over his shining armor, with his sword hanging by his side. Theodora thought he was the most handsome man she had ever seen. Justinian saw Theodora standing by the side of the road. "Who is that beautiful woman?" Justinian thought. And he asked the soldier beside him. The other soldiers only shrugged. "I must find out," Justinian thought to himself. "I want to know who she is at once." After a long search, Justinian found Theodora's home. He was overcome by her beauty and charmed by her intelligence. He fell in love with her and married her. And when he became emperor, Theodora became the empress. The two of them ruled side by side, and Justinian rarely made a decision without consulting his wife. So Justinian is very famous. However, maybe he wouldn't have made some of his decisions without consulting his wife Theodora. Now, 5 years after Justinian became emperor, the people of Constantinople rioted. They wanted Justinian to get rid of 2 men who worked for him, 2 men who were very unpopular. When Justinian refused, the crowd became more and more angry. They charged through the streets of the city, overturning merchant stalls, wrecking walls, and burning buildings. They even set fire to the Hagia Sophia, the beautiful church that we saw. They killed policemen and gathered around the emperor's palace shouting, "Victory, victory!" Justinian was terrified. "If they break into the palace, they'll kill us both," he exclaimed. "Let's leave Constantinople at once." "If you run away, they'll take the throne away from you," Theodora warned him. You'll never be emperor again. That's better than dying, Justinian retorted. It was more important to him that he would protect himself and his wife Theodora than to continue being emperor. You can run if you want to, Theodora said. You have plenty of money and you can always sail away in the royal ships. But I never want to give up my royal purple cloak and my crown. How can someone who has once been emperor agree to become a wandering refugee, which means a person leaving their home? If you run away, you will soon wish that you had died instead. Finally, Theodora convinced Justinian to stay. He ordered his generals to lead the army against the rebels. The fight was long and hard, but Justinian's men won. Justinian kept his throne and rebuilt the damaged city. He made the Hagia Sophia even bigger and more beautiful than ever. And for the rest of his life, he was grateful to Theodora for keeping him in Constantinople. The empress had saved the emperor's throne. So she ended up showing a lot of wisdom. Who knows exactly all of the motives behind it, but she showed a lot of wisdom to say, we need to stay. We can't just run away. And everything was able to be restored there. It's not going to get into that. Well, in the next part, it does talk about rebuilding the Hagia Sophia and having some mosaics, but we're not going to read that part of it. Anyway, so that is a little more about Justinian and Theodora. I'd love to hear a little bit more of what they were like, since our book just skips over it and says just briefly what they were like and why they're important. That is all for your history video, but you also have the study guide to complete, and tomorrow I'll have a video going over the answers so that you can feel good about the test on Thursday. Talk to you all later. Bye.